Welcome back. This week we get a considerable amount of work done on the Duramax diesel engine. We get our F-150, the leak and intake gasket, wrapped up, and there's a little bit of footage on the Z1R as well as the 48 Chevy. Hope you enjoyed it. In preparation for putting the rocker arm shafts back on the Duramax, I'm loosening the jam nuts for the adjusters. The reason for that is when we go to put the rocker arm shaft down with the perches, that'll keep any spring pressure from some of the valves putting tension against it, which will throw off the torque spec. I'm just going to use a 3/8 impact to bust the jam nuts loose. Then we'll just take and turn the adjusters back out a little bit so that there's no tension on them when we install it. Before installing the rocker arm shaft assembly, we need to make sure that the valve bridges are in place. So this is a 32 valve engine. There's 2 intakes and 2 exhausts per cylinder, but there's only one rocker arm that pushes down to open both valves. So it uses a bridge to connect 2 of the valves so that when it pushes down in the center, it'll open both valves at the same time. Just like with the cylinder head, the rocker arm shaft uses alignment dowels. Get our shaft in place here. Get it lined up. Pull all of these back to make sure that they do go over the push rods. There we go. Get these hands started, and then we'll get them torqued down. Now you can kind of see the reason why I wanted to get the valve adjustments all the way back, so that way when we go to torque it down, it'll be the correct torque all the way across the shaft. With the one rocker arm shaft in place, we'll get the other one installed, we'll get it torqued down, then it'll be time to adjust the valves. Kind of a unique torque sequence, and where they normally would have us start in the middle and work our way out, they actually have us starting here, and then here to here, then the middle, and then to the outside. So we'll do these. I've already done each one of them once, but I always like to go back and check them and do them a second time. There we go. The next thing to do is to get the valves adjusted, but I'm going to wait for the students to do that. This is something we don't get to see very often, and I want to make sure that students have an opportunity to do it.
With the first sequence of valve adjustments completed, I'm rotating the engine over for the second sequence.
She painted a mark on the balancer so he'll know where to line it up. Here Brandon's using a screwdriver to turn the adjuster while using a feeler gauge to check for the actual adjustment and feeling a little bit of resistance. Then he'll tighten the jam nut to keep everything locked in place.
With all the valves adjusted, we're putting on the lower rocket cover.
Here JC's really getting into his work to get to that one rear fastener for the valve cover. Here the students are putting the gaskets in the upper valve cover segments before they're installed.
I'm trying to figure this out.
Next, the upper valve cover goes on.
Next, we're putting the intakes on each side of the heads. They don't use gaskets for the intakes themselves. They actually use sealer. So the gasket kit comes with 3 tubes of this. So we're going to run an 1/8 inch bead around the perimeter of each one of the intake runners, and then we're going to put those down and get those torqued. Here the student is running a tap down the hole to clean up the threads for that bolt that was giving us a little bit of trouble so we can get that intake back on this truck.
With the hole repaired, I am now torquing the intake.
Now the throttle body goes back into place. Here the students are wrapping it up by connecting all of the vacuum lines. It's been a while since the truck came in, but not only did it have that coolant leak, but it also had a lean burn code that was caused by a vacuum leak. But when we got everything back together, it was running fine, but we kept hearing a little ticking on the passenger side of the vehicle here, and we put it in gear, it was misfiring a little bit. So we learned that one of the plug wires was not going down on the plug all the way, but in inspecting it, I'm going to show you what we found, and I'm also going to show you what we're going to do to fix it. This is the part of the plug wire that's inside of the boot that connects to the spark plug. First, you can see it's pretty rusted and corroded, but it had come off of the wire. Now, I've already taken care of pulling the wire completely back through the boot, and I've shaved back some of the insulation of the wire. So I'm going to show you how we're going to repair this wire so we don't have to buy a whole new set. So the first thing we're going to do is get this piece here glass beaded nice and clean, and then I'll show you how we're going to put this back together and crimp it, put it back in place, and that's going to take care of the miss. This is after glass beading, so you can see there's a big difference in how that looks. So what I'm going to do now is get that wire bent over and get it crimped in place, pull it back through the boot, then we can put it back onto the truck. The end of the wire is crimped on, we pulled it back through the boots, now we're going to put it back on the truck, fire it up, make sure the mist is gone. The plug wire is fixed and back on the truck. Let's start it up and see how it sounds. No more ticking from the mist, no more hissing from the vacuum leak, so I think we pretty much solved all the problems. I'm ready to start working on that old brass wheel now. I've got my paint stripper and a brush to apply it. Still haven't decided if I'm going to pull it completely apart to get it polished out, but the first thing is to get the paint off. You can already see some of the brass here where the paint was scraped, but I do want to do a good job of getting all the paint off of this, especially where they join, where they're screwed into the center hub, because I'm thinking about pulling this apart, and this will make it easier to get it pulled apart as well. Just going to focus on two different spokes for right now. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We want to make sure that this is going to work. Put a very liberal amount on this, because it looks like it may have a couple of coats on it. I don't want to spread it around. That's where a lot of people make mistakes. You don't want to spread the stripper. You just want it put on. We're not painting. Paint stripper's doing a great job. It's going to take a couple of different times of doing it. See the gray right there? That's actually looks like primer, or it may have been painted gray. The black paint's coming off pretty easily, and I can scrape the primer, but I don't want to do any more damage and have to do more polishing than I have to. So we may have to do this twice, but you can see it's going to look really good when it's done. I've already uncovered some numbers here. I'm really interested to know what else is hiding under all this paint. This is the wheel just after a little bit of sandblasting with some fine sand. I think that's going to be okay. So I think what I'm going to do is strip the majority of the paint off of it, and then sandblast the rest of it, and then polish the spokes. And I think this wheel's going to look real nice. My principal, Mr. Cassidy, found this picture for me. This is what the brass control valve would have looked like in service. This is set up somewhere as a display up north around the Mississippi.
Okay.
Josh and Elma from the first engine building team came by to help out the second team during their practice.
And then while you're up there, you can grab that and bring it in.
Got the battery box painted up with new hardware, and now we're about to put the grommets back on it before installing it back on the frame. This is one of the two front engine mounts. You can see they're in pretty bad shape. We were able to acquire two new ones to replace them. The new mounts out of the box have paint inside where the threads are, so we're going to run a tap down them and clean them up before we put them onto the frame and bolt it in place. That looks a lot better, so the bolts will go in much smoother.
Now we're putting in the front engine mount.
Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll have the fuel injectors for the Duramax ready to put in, as well as the bridge for the intake manifold. We'll have more of the battery box and harness set up for the Z1R Kawasaki, and barring the weather, we'll see if we can get the brass wheel sandblasted. See you next week.